The morning sunlight streamed softly through the large windows of the courthouse, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floors. People were starting to take their seats, their murmurs creating a low hum of anticipation. Everyone seemed to know this was not an ordinary trial. It had drawn attention from all over town, and whispers of curiosity floated through the air. Today, a man who had lived a quiet life would face questions about his marriage and the woman he had trusted the most. He sat at the front table, his hands clasped tightly, fingers pressing into each other as if to hold himself together. He had always thought he knew his wife well. He had admired her calm demeanor, her intelligence, and the way she could carry herself in any situation. Yet, as he sat there now, in the hushed courtroom, a creeping doubt gnawed at him. Something felt off, though he could not yet put a finger on it. The opposing counsel's reputation for uncovering hidden truths was well known, and he feared what might come next. The judge entered the room. A tall figure in a black robe, with a presence that immediately demanded respect. The room fell silent. Cameras were not allowed, but the weight of the moment made it feel as though the walls themselves were watching. The judge's gaze swept across the courtroom, pausing on the man and then on his wife. She sat beside him, her hands folded neatly on her lap, her expression serene. There was no flicker of fear in her eyes. The trial began with the usual formalities: introductions and the reading of the charges and claims. Yet, from the very start, it was clear this case was unusual. The man's wife, although quiet, seemed to command attention without trying. There was something magnetic about her presence, something that made people lean in without realizing it. He had married her thinking he knew every side of her, but now, in this courtroom, a feeling of unease settled deep in his chest. The opposing lawyer stood, a sharp and calculated woman known for her ability to twist details to her advantage. She spoke with a tone that was measured but pointed, hinting that the wife may not be who she claimed to be. The words were subtle at first, questions about her past, the documents she had provided when they got married, and some discrepancies that had been found by investigators. Each question was carefully chosen, designed to plant seeds of doubt. The man watched his wife closely. She remained calm, a gentle smile playing on her lips, as though she had already expected this. Yet in the back of his mind he remembered small incidents, moments that had once seemed insignificant. The unexplained trips, the people she spoke about vaguely, the documents that were always slightly delayed or confusing. He had never thought much of them before, but now, under the harsh light of scrutiny, they seemed to form a pattern. He thought back to their first meeting. She had walked into his life like a breeze, confident, elegant, and mysterious in the most captivating way. He had been drawn to her instantly. There had been an instant connection, a feeling that they were meant to be together. Over time, he had discovered her intelligence, her wit, and her way of seeing the world differently. Yet perhaps it had all been carefully constructed. A facade so perfect that no one could see the cracks beneath it. The courtroom air grew heavier as the lawyer continued, laying out pieces of evidence that seemed minor at first but slowly began to create a picture. There were inconsistencies in travel records, small gaps in her personal history, and whispers of connections that seemed impossible to trace. Each revelation was like a gentle tap, and yet, with each tap, his heart sank a little more. The calmness of his wife made it all the more confusing. How could she appear so relaxed when the walls seemed to be closing in? He glanced at her again, trying to read her expression. She looked at him, and for a fleeting second, he thought he saw a hint of sadness, maybe regret. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared. She was composed, almost untouchable, like a master chess player thinking 5 moves ahead. It frightened him. He realized that the woman he had loved, trusted, and lived with for years might be far more complicated than he had ever imagined. The first witness was called, someone who had known her briefly in the past. Their testimony was polite but filled with subtle suggestions that her story didn't fully match up with official records. The man felt a shiver run down his spine. Each detail, no matter how small, seemed to peel away another layer of the life he thought he knew. He could feel the whispers of doubt spreading through his mind, eroding the certainty that had once been unshakable. The lawyer presented old photographs, letters, and documents. The man recognized some, confused by others. The jury looked intrigued, leaning forward, trying to catch every nuance. His wife accepted the documents calmly, sometimes glancing at them with a soft smile, as if she understood the attention they were drawing, but had no fear of their content. He wondered what she knew that he did not. How could she remain so composed while the foundation of their life together was being questioned? Between witnesses, there were moments when the judge allowed him and his wife to confer quietly. He looked at her, desperate for reassurance. She simply reached out and held his hand, her grip firm and warm. It was a silent message of confidence, a reassurance that perhaps there was more to the story than what was being revealed. But it also made him question even more. Was she helping him? Or was she leading him into a revelation he was not yet ready to face? As the morning moved into afternoon, the tension in the room grew unbearable. Each piece of evidence, each subtle question, each hint of a hidden truth added to the sense of anticipation. The spectators were silent, the courtroom hanging on every word. The man felt trapped between what he thought he knew and the growing realization that there might be an entirely different reality. He recalled the conversations they had over the years, simple moments, shared laughter, private jokes, and late-night talks. Could it be that all of it had been real, or had it been a carefully constructed illusion? He tried to reconcile the warmth he had felt in their home with the cold precision of the legal scrutiny around them. When the court recessed for a short break, the man stepped outside into the sunlight, trying to breathe. The air felt heavy, thick with unspoken truths. He leaned against a stone pillar, thinking about all the small signs he had ignored. He realized that love, as deep and consuming as it could be, might not always be enough to shield someone from deception. He wanted to confront his wife, to ask her directly, but the courtroom rules and the weight of the trial made it impossible. Returning inside, he found her waiting patiently. She looked at him with those same calm eyes, and for a moment, he wondered if she had always known this moment would come. The trial continued, each question more pointed, each document more revealing. The man felt like he was walking a tightrope, unsure of which side would hold firm. The day drew to a close, but the questions lingered. As he left the courthouse, he could feel the weight of the unspoken truth pressing down on him. He had always believed in the certainty of their love and their shared life. Now he realized that certainty might have been an illusion. The real story of his wife was yet to unfold. In the silence of the courtroom earlier in the day, hinted at just how shocking that revelation might be. That night, at home, he sat alone, replaying every moment of the trial in his mind. The calm demeanor of his wife, the subtle smiles, and the glances that seemed to carry hidden meanings haunted him. He wondered what she was thinking, what she knew that he did not, and how deeply their lives had been intertwined with secrets he had never imagined. Sleep came slowly, and even then, it was restless. Filled with fragments of memories and questions that demanded answers, he knew that tomorrow would bring more revelations, more pieces of a puzzle that he was only beginning to understand. The courtroom had been a place of quiet tension today, but he sensed that the real storm was yet to come. And deep down, he felt a mixture of fear and anticipation, knowing that when the truth finally emerged, it would change everything he thought he knew about the woman he had married and the life they had shared. The next morning, the man arrived at the courthouse with a heavy heart. He felt as though the weight of yesterday's revelations was still pressing down on him. Every step he took through the hallways of the courthouse felt heavier than the last, and he could hear the faint echo of footsteps, like whispers reminding him that today could bring more surprises. His wife was already there, calm as ever, sitting with her hands folded neatly on the table in front of her. She looked up and gave him a small smile, the kind that used to make him feel safe. Now, it only made him more unsure. The judge entered the room, and the courtroom settled into silence. The man could feel the tension thick in the air. Today the focus would shift from small inconsistencies to the deeper secrets that had been carefully hidden for years. The opposing lawyer had promised to uncover the truth, and everyone present knew that the day would not end quietly. The first witness was called, a former neighbor who had known the wife years ago. The witness's voice was steady but cautious, revealing fragments of the wife's past that had never been spoken about openly. She had used a different name at one point, had lived in another city, It had connections to people whose reputations were curious at best. Each word planted seeds of doubt in the man's mind. He remembered the way his wife had always been discreet about her life before him. He had never questioned it because he trusted her completely. But now he could see that there had always been more than met the eye. Documents were presented, showing places she had lived, schools she had attended, and jobs she had held. Some were legitimate, others were difficult to trace. The man's chest tightened with every piece of information. He had believed he knew her history, the story she had told him when they first met and throughout their marriage. But now, every detail seemed to hold a hidden meaning, a part of a larger puzzle he did not understand. He glanced at her occasionally, searching for a sign, a crack in her calm exterior. She remained composed, as though she were in control of everything. Even when the witnesses spoke of her past in ways that left him dizzy with confusion, there was a grace to her composure, a quiet power that he had never fully appreciated before. It was mesmerizing and terrifying at the same time. How could someone maintain such control when their life was being scrutinized so closely? The lawyer asked questions with precision, guiding the witnesses to reveal small inconsistencies. One document did not match the signature on another, one address had been altered, a phone number could not be traced. These details seemed minor, but together they formed a pattern that the man could not ignore. Each revelation chipped away at the life he had built in his mind, the certainty he had held about his marriage. Between testimonies, he found himself reflecting on their life together. He remembered quiet mornings in their home, the way she would make him tea just the way he liked it, and how she seemed to know what he needed before he spoke. He thought about their conversations, the laughter, the arguments, and the shared dreams. Were all of those moments real? Or had she played a role so perfectly that he could not distinguish truth from performance? A private investigator was called to the stand next. He spoke about the research he had done on the wife's past, explaining the gaps, the mysterious travels, and the people she had associated with. The man listened, heart pounding. As the investigator described how the wife had created an elaborate history, one that was believable and detailed enough to escape suspicion for years, the more he heard, the more he questioned himself. How had he never seen the signs? How had he trusted so completely? The courtroom seemed to shrink around him as the hours passed. Each revelation was like a small weight added to his chest, pressing him down. Yet despite all the hints and clues, his wife remained unshaken. She answered questions with calm clarity, never faltering, never betraying a hint of fear or guilt. The man wondered if she knew how to navigate this situation better than anyone else. Perhaps she had always known that the truth would come out in her own time. There were moments when he felt anger rising, frustration at the way the world seemed to be turning against him. He wanted to confront her, demand answers, but the court rules and the formal setting made it impossible. He was trapped in a world of questions with no immediate answers. Forced to watch as the story of his wife unfolded piece by piece before him, he remembered the first time he had met her. She had walked into his life with a confidence that made everyone notice. He had been drawn to her energy, her intelligence, and her charm. Over time, he had believed he had uncovered everything about her, every quirk, every detail. But now he realized that some parts of her life had been carefully hidden, layers that he had never been able to penetrate. The afternoon brought more witnesses, each with their own fragment of truth. Some had met her briefly, some had interacted with her in professional settings, and some had known her in ways he had never imagined. Each testimony was like a piece of a jigsaw puzzle, slowly revealing a picture that he could not yet fully comprehend. The man struggled to reconcile the warmth of their home life with the calculated precision of her past. Could one person hold such contradictions? Was it possible that the woman he loved could be both genuine and secretive in ways he had never imagined? He noticed the reactions of the people around him. Some jurors leaned forward, curious and engaged, while others whispered quietly to themselves, trying to piece together the narrative. Even the judge, who had seen countless cases, seemed intrigued by the complexity of the situation. The man realized that he was not alone in his confusion. The entire room was caught in the tension, waiting for the truth to surface. During a brief recess, he stepped outside, needing fresh air to clear his mind. The courthouse steps were crowded with onlookers, reporters, and staff, but he felt alone in his thoughts. He replayed every conversation, every shared moment with his wife, wondering how much of it had been authentic and how much had been part of a carefully constructed image. He felt a mix of sorrow, confusion, and awe. She had managed to create a life so convincing that he had never questioned it, even under the bright sunlight of her past. Returning inside, he found his wife waiting patiently. She gave him a reassuring glance, and for a brief moment, he felt the comfort of her presence. Yet the questions remained gnawing at his mind. What did she know that he did not? How had she managed to navigate the complexity of her own past so effortlessly? The calm she displayed was both comforting and disconcerting. He wondered if he would ever truly understand her. The day continued with more revelations. Small details emerged that hinted at the true scope of her past. The man listened carefully, trying to absorb everything while holding on to a sense of reality. The line between truth and deception seemed to blur with each passing moment. He realized that understanding her fully might be impossible, that some mysteries were meant to remain hidden, even from those closest to her. As the trial drew to a close for the day, the man sat quietly, reflecting on what he had learned. He knew that tomorrow would bring more questions, more evidence, and possibly answers that he was not ready to hear. The courtroom had been a place of revelations today, but he sensed that the most shocking moments were still ahead. At home that night, he could not sleep. Memories of laughter, arguments, and quiet conversations played in his mind. The calm demeanor of his wife haunted him, her serene smile both reassuring and enigmatic. He wondered what tomorrow would bring, how much of her story would be revealed, and whether he could handle the truth when it came. He realized that the woman he had loved and trusted for so many years was far more complex than he had ever imagined. Her life had been a series of carefully constructed steps, each designed to lead to this moment, to this revelation in the courtroom. He did not yet know what the full truth would be, but he understood one thing clearly: his world would never be the same again. And as he drifted into a restless sleep, he knew that he was standing on the edge of a story that would change everything he thought he knew about the woman beside him. The next day, the man entered the courtroom with a mix of dread and curiosity. Every step felt heavier than before, as if the weight of the previous day's revelations had settled permanently on his shoulders. His wife sat beside him, as calm and composed as ever, her posture perfect, hands neatly folded. She looked at him briefly, giving a small, reassuring smile. It was the same smile she had always used to calm him, but now it felt like a challenge, a quiet reminder that she was always a step ahead. The judge took his seat, and the courtroom grew silent. Today was expected to be different, more revealing. As witnesses would recount deeper aspects of the wife's life that had remained hidden until now, the man felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He had hoped that what had surfaced so far was the limit of the truth, but deep down, he feared it was only the beginning. The first witness was a colleague from her previous work. She described the wife as intelligent, capable, and unusually private. The colleague mentioned how she had kept personal matters vague, avoided casual conversation about her family, and often redirected questions about her past. The man listened closely, feeling a strange mix of admiration and unease. How had he never noticed these patterns before? Had he been blind, or had she been that careful all along? More witnesses followed, each painting a picture of a woman who had always carefully managed her identity. A friend from college spoke about a name change, few incidents where she had moved suddenly, and the way she had seamlessly blended into new environments. The man felt his chest tighten as he realized that the calm, familiar presence he had shared his life with might have been built on layers of concealment. Documents were presented, detailing her travels, employment records, and educational history. Some information matched what the man knew, but other pieces were incomplete or contradictory. It became clear that her life had been carefully crafted not by chance, but by intent. Each piece of evidence felt like a puzzle piece clicking into place, revealing a larger, more complex picture than he could have imagined. The opposing lawyer began to connect the dots, guiding the courtroom through a timeline of her life that the man had never known. Places she had lived, people she had interacted with, and details she had intentionally obscured were all being revealed. The man felt a wave of disbelief. He had married someone he thought he knew, yet each new revelation made him question everything he had believed. The wife listened quietly, her calmness unbroken. At times, she glanced at her husband, a hint of empathy in her eyes, but no sign of fear or guilt. Her composure unnerved him. How could someone maintain such poise while their carefully hidden life was being examined so thoroughly? He realized that she was not only intelligent but also highly disciplined and aware of how to control the narrative. Between witnesses, he found himself reflecting on their shared life. He remembered the small details, the way she knew exactly what he liked for breakfast, the stories she had told him about her family, the trips they had taken together. Could it all have been a careful act? Or was it a mixture of genuine affection and calculated concealment? The line between truth and deception blurred with each thought, leaving him both heartbroken and fascinated. A historian was called to testify next. Someone who had known the wife years ago in a completely different setting. This witness described her as meticulous, deliberate, and someone who understood the power of appearances. The historian revealed that she had often reinvented herself, changing her identity to adapt to circumstances or avoid scrutiny. The man felt a chill run down his spine. Every careful move she had made now made sense in a way he had never realized before. The lawyer asked detailed questions about her relationships, highlighting how she had built trust with people while keeping crucial parts of her life hidden. The man's heart sank with every answer. How had he not noticed the patterns? How had he been so certain of the life they had shared? He felt a mix of betrayal and awe, realizing that he had been living with someone who had mastered the art of concealment, without him ever suspecting, despite the revelations. The wife's demeanor remained consistent. She answered questions with clarity, never flinching, never showing hesitation. The courtroom seemed to hang on her every word. Her calmness was magnetic, drawing attention and curiosity simultaneously. The man was both relieved and disturbed by her poise. She had always had a presence that could command a room, but now it carried a weight of mystery that left him uncertain and anxious. During a brief break, he stepped outside into the cool air. The sunlight felt harsh after the dim courtroom, highlighting the fatigue in his eyes. He walked slowly, trying to process everything he had learned. Each memory of their life together now seemed layered with questions. Moments of intimacy, trust, and laughter were tinged with uncertainty. He wondered if some of it had been orchestrated, if her warmth and affection had been partly a performance designed to conceal her true identity. Returning to the courtroom, felt a renewed tension. The next witnesses were prepared to present more direct evidence of her past, including letters, photographs, and other documents. Each item revealed another layer, showing a careful planning and execution of a life that had been partially hidden. The man realized that her intelligence and foresight were formidable. He had loved her for her calmness, her wit, and her strength. But now he understood that those same qualities had allowed her to navigate a life filled with secrets. The lawyer asked pointed questions about the documents, highlighting discrepancies in dates, places, and names. The man could see the pattern emerging, a life carefully constructed yet full of minor gaps that now stood out. He was struck by the meticulous attention to detail his wife must have employed over the years. How had he not seen it? How had he not questioned the subtle differences in stories, the gaps in memories, and the inconsistencies in her past? He glanced at her once more. She looked at him, her eyes steady, unwavering. There was a quiet understanding in her gaze, as if she knew the impact the revelations would have on him, yet she offered no immediate explanation. Her calmness was both a comfort and a challenge. It reminded him of the person he had fallen in love with. Yet it also highlighted the distance between the life he had imagined and the reality he was now beginning to grasp. The day continued with more testimonies and evidence, each piece adding to the intricate portrait of a woman who had lived a life full of deliberate choices and concealed truths. The man felt a growing mixture of confusion, respect, and unease. He was learning that the person he had trusted most in the world was far more complex than he had ever realized. Every new detail revealed the skill and intelligence she had used to navigate her past, a past he had only glimpsed in fragments until now, as the courtroom proceedings wound down. The man sat quietly, trying to absorb the enormity of what he had learned. He understood that the story of his wife was far from complete. But he also realized that her calmness and composure would likely remain unchanged no matter what else came to light. She had built a life with layers of secrecy, yet she remained poised, unwavering, and in control. Leaving the courtroom, he walked slowly, feeling both exhausted and enlightened. The layers of his wife's past were slowly being peeled away, revealing a woman of remarkable intelligence, strategy, and presence. He could not yet fully comprehend her motives, but he knew that he was witnessing the unfolding of a story far more complex than he had ever imagined. At home that evening, he sat in silence, reflecting on the day's events. Memories of shared laughter, whispered conversations, and quiet evenings together were now tinged with new understanding. He realized that the life they had shared was a blend of truth and carefully guarded secrets, and he wondered how much of it she had planned from the beginning. Sleep came reluctantly, filled with questions, doubts, and the anticipation of what the next day would bring. He understood that the courtroom would eventually reveal more. But the woman he had known, loved, and lived with for years was far more intricate and layered than he had ever imagined. The calm demeanor that had once comforted him now carried a weight of mystery that left him both anxious and captivated. He knew that tomorrow would bring new revelations, and that the story of his wife was far from complete. The anticipation, uncertainty, and awe filled his thoughts as he prepared himself for the next chapter of a story that was still unfolding, one that would change everything he thought he knew. About the woman beside him, the courtroom was unusually quiet that morning, the kind of quiet that made every footstep, every whisper, every shuffle of papers seem louder than it actually was. The man entered with a sense of both dread and anticipation. He had spent the previous days watching as the layers of his wife's past were slowly peeled away, and now he sensed that the truth was about to be revealed in full. The calmness of his wife beside him did little to ease his anxiety. Her serene smile was steady, composed, and unyielding, as though she knew exactly what was about to happen and was fully prepared for it. The judge entered the courtroom, and silence fell like a heavy curtain. The opposing lawyer, known for her ability to build tension and suspense, stood confidently. She had already laid out the fragments of evidence, hinted at inconsistencies, and painted a picture of a woman with a life carefully concealed. Today, however, would be different. Today, the truth would finally emerge. The first witnesses of the day were experts in documentation and identity verification. They spoke slowly, explaining how records had been traced, verified, and compared. The man listened carefully, feeling a growing knot in his stomach as his inconsistencies, carefully documented before him, were explained. It was no longer about fragments of truth. It was about a full revelation that would leave no room for doubt. The opposing lawyer then presented letters, photographs, and official documents that had been uncovered. Each item carried a story of its own, revealing parts of the wife's life that the man had never known. There were records of a previous identity, connections to influential figures, and subtle signs that she had always been able to adapt to circumstances with intelligence and precision. Every revelation made him feel as though he were watching someone else's life unfold, a life that had run parallel to the one they had shared. He tried to focus on her reactions. She remained calm, answering questions with a soft, controlled voice, her expressions unchanged. At times, she glanced at him, a subtle gesture that seemed both reassuring and enigmatic. Her composure was almost unsettling. How could she remain so poised while the world around her seemed ready to explode with secrets? Then came the moment that made everyone in the courtroom lean forward. The judge called for the wife to stand and asked her to reveal her true identity officially. The room held its breath. For a moment, the woman hesitated, not in fear, but in deliberate preparation. She reached into her bag and pulled out a set of documents, unfolding them slowly. The papers contained official records, legal name changes, and proof of her previous identity. The silence in the room was palpable. The man's heart pounded in his chest as he realized that the woman he had married was not the person he had always believed her to be. The jury members, the spectators, and even the judge leaned in to take in the revelation. The wife's documents showed a life that had been carefully hidden, a life of intelligence, strategy, and secrecy. She had been connected to influential figures, had managed complex situations, and had successfully concealed her identity until now. When she spoke, her voice was calm, measured, and clear. She explained her motives, the reasons for concealing her past, and the steps she had taken to protect herself and those around her. The courtroom listened in awe, the story unfolding in a way that no one had anticipated. She was not a criminal, nor a manipulator for selfish gain, but a woman who had lived with caution and foresight, ensuring her safety and the safety of her loved ones. The man sat frozen, trying to absorb every word. His mind raced through the memories of their life together. He remembered her intelligence, her calmness, the way she had handled challenges, and the subtle ways she had guided their shared life. It all made sense now, in a way it had not before. He felt a mixture of relief, admiration, and lingering doubt. The woman he loved had been far more complex than he had ever imagined. The opposing lawyer, sensing the shift in the courtroom, asked further questions to clarify the details. The wife answered each one without hesitation. She spoke of the challenges she had faced, the careful planning required to maintain her identity, and the reasons for revealing the truth only now. The courtroom listened in silence, captivated by her story. The tension finally giving way to understanding. The man's emotions were conflicted. He felt a surge of pride for her intelligence and bravery, but also a sting of betrayal for the secrets that had been kept from him. Yet, as he watched her stand confidently, explaining her past with clarity and poise, he realized that the life they had shared had been genuine, even if parts of it had been hidden. Her love had been real, her presence comforting, her actions, though cautious, always considered his well-being. The judge reviewed the documents and asked the wife a few final questions. Her responses were consistent, clear, and authoritative. She revealed connections to family members, distant relatives, and professional networks that had required discretion and care. The man realized that her life had been a careful balancing act, one that required intelligence, patience, and resilience. When the final pieces of evidence were laid out, the courtroom erupted in whispers. People exchanged looks of disbelief and admiration. The man turned to his wife, seeing her not just as the partner he had loved, but as a remarkable individual who had navigated a complex life with courage and strategy. He understood now that the calm presence he had always admired was part of a much larger strength that had allowed her to face every challenge with grace. The judge finally spoke, acknowledging the revelation and the courage it took to disclose the truth. The courtroom, still buzzing with astonishment, realized the story they had witnessed was not one of deceit or malice, but of careful navigation, intelligence, and protection. The man felt a mix of relief and awe, finally understanding the depth of the woman beside him. The wife sat down, her calm demeanor intact, yet there was a subtle satisfaction in her eyes. She had faced the scrutiny, revealed her past, and done so with honesty and grace. The man reached out and took her hand, feeling the warmth and certainty he had feared was lost. They shared a quiet moment, a connection reaffirmed, even amidst the shock and revelations of the day. As the courtroom proceedings concluded, the man reflected on what had just happened. He realized that life with this woman had always been richer, deeper, and more complex than he had ever understood. Her intelligence, caution, and poise had shaped a life that was both challenging and beautiful. He knew that the world had witnessed a remarkable story, one that would be remembered for the courage and wisdom of the woman who had revealed her truth. Walking out of the courtroom together, he felt a renewed sense of understanding and connection. The layers of secrecy that had once seemed frightening now appeared as a testament to her strength and resilience. He understood that their life together, while built on some hidden truths, was real, meaningful, and profoundly shaped by the remarkable character of the woman beside him. That evening, at home, he sat quietly reflecting. He thought about the past, the memories, and the new understanding that had emerged. He realized that love, trust, and admiration could exist alongside mystery and complexity. His wife had shown him that strength often lies in discretion, and courage can take many forms. The courtroom had fallen silent when the truth was revealed, but in his heart, a new clarity had emerged, a recognition of the extraordinary woman he had always known. Now fully understood in ways he could never have imagined, the days following the courtroom revelation were filled with a mixture of relief, reflection, and subtle tension. The man walked through life with a new awareness, a deeper understanding of the woman beside him, and a recognition that his life had changed in ways both profound and delicate. At first, the world outside felt different. People looked at him with curiosity, some with admiration, and some with disbelief. The story of the courtroom and the wife's revealed identity had spread quietly through their circle, leaving whispers and murmurs wherever they went. At home, things were quiet, but the atmosphere carried a weight of thoughtfulness. The man and his wife spent long hours in conversation, retracing moments of the past, reflecting on the truths that had come to light. He asked questions not out of anger or accusation, but out of genuine curiosity. How had she managed such a complex life while maintaining normalcy? How had she balanced love, discretion, and caution so perfectly? She answered with the same calmness that had always captivated him, explaining the reasoning behind her decisions, the careful planning, and the choices she had made to protect herself and the people she cared about as they talked. The man realized that the past did not diminish the moments they had shared. Laughter, warmth, and intimacy had been real. Her love had been genuine, even if layered with discretion. He felt a mix of relief and admiration, understanding that the strength it had taken to live with such secrecy had always been part of her remarkable character. There was no resentment, only a growing respect for the depth of her intelligence, resilience, and courage. Friends and family reached out cautiously. Some offered support, others posed questions, and a few struggled to reconcile the image they had of the woman with the truths that had emerged. The man found himself explaining gently, with patience and clarity, not to defend, but to help them understand that her life had been a careful balance of discretion, strategy, and authenticity. He emphasized that her calmness, intelligence, and love had always been real, even if parts of her life had been hidden. The wife, for her part, continued to display the same poise and grace. She moved through daily life with confidence, never flinching under the gaze of curious friends or distant acquaintances. Her calm demeanor had always been part of her, and now it carried an added depth. The man watched her closely, marveling at how she navigated conversations, interactions, and challenges with a quiet authority that left no room for doubt about her strength of character. Together, they revisited places from their past, small moments, and everyday routines that now held new meaning. They walked through parks where they had shared quiet conversations, visited shops they had frequented, and revisited their home with a renewed sense of understanding. Every familiar space became a canvas for reflection, painting memories with the brush of revelation. The man realized that the foundation of their life was stronger than he had feared, built not on lies, but on love, trust, and mutual respect, even if some layers has been carefully concealed. The man also found himself thinking about the broader implications of what had been revealed. Trust, he realized, was a more complex concept than he had previously understood. It was not only about knowing every detail, but also about recognizing the intentions behind actions, the reasons for secrecy, and the integrity with which one navigated life. His admiration for his wife grew as he understood that her careful concealment had not been deceitful in a harmful way, but protective and strategic. It was a testament to her character, her foresight, and her ability to adapt. The community around them slowly began to understand as well. Conversations that once carried whispers of suspicion began to shift into discussions of respect and awe. People marveled at the courage it took to maintain discretion, the intelligence required to navigate such a complex life, and the grace with which she had revealed her identity when the time was right. The courtroom had been silent at the revelation, but now, in daily life, admiration and understanding replaced the initial shock. The man and his wife also faced moments of solitude together. In these quiet times, they reflected on what they had learned, the impact of the revelation, and the ways it had reshaped their lives. They spoke of future plans, dreams, and possibilities, now with a deeper awareness of each other's strengths and the complexities of their shared existence. The conversations were long and filled with contemplation, building a renewed sense of connection and trust. Despite the clarity that had emerged, there were moments of lingering doubt. Moments when the man would recall a detail or memory and wonder about the layers he had not yet understood. His wife met these moments with patience, answering questions with clarity and compassion. Together, they navigated these uncertainties, understanding that some aspects of life would always remain complex and multifaceted. The man learned that love could coexist with mystery, trust with complexity, and respect with curiosity. In the weeks that followed, their relationship grew stronger. The man found himself appreciating the qualities he had once taken for granted: her intelligence, her calmness, her foresight, and her capacity for love. He realized that their shared life had been richer and more meaningful because of her depth and the careful choices she had made. The courtroom had revealed her identity, but it had also revealed her character. And the man found himself filled with a renewed sense of admiration and connection. The wife, for her part, continued to live with quiet strength. She engaged with friends, family, and colleagues with grace, maintaining the calm authority that had always been part of her presence. Her past, once hidden, now integrated into their shared life, became a source of respect rather than confusion. She had faced the scrutiny of the courtroom, revealed her truth, and continued to move forward with poise. The man admired her more than ever, understanding that true strength often lay in discretion, courage, and careful planning. They also began to reflect on the lessons of the experience. Life, they realized, was rarely as simple as it seemed. People carried layers of complexity, histories carefully navigated, and choices shaped by circumstance and foresight. Understanding one another required patience, empathy, and a willingness to accept both clarity and mystery. The man felt grateful for the revelation, recognizing that it had deepened his understanding of his wife and strengthened the bond they shared in quiet moments. The man often thought about the courtroom, the silence that had fallen, and the moment when her true identity was revealed. He remembered the mixture of awe, shock, and respect that had swept through the room. He realized that the experience had changed not only his perception of her, but also his understanding of life, trust, and the human capacity for strength and resilience. Together, they moved forward, embracing the complexities of life and love. Their connection deepened, built not only on shared experiences and memories, but also on the respect for the intelligence, courage, and foresight that had guided her through years of carefully concealed challenges. The man understood that the courtroom had revealed her past, but it had also revealed her character, and that revelation had brought them closer than ever before. As time passed, life gradually returned to a rhythm of normalcy. Yet the memory of the courtroom, the revelations, and the quiet strength of the woman beside him remained vivid. The man carried these lessons with him, appreciating the depth, resilience, and grace of the woman he loved. He knew that their life together would continue to be shaped by understanding, empathy, and mutual respect, and that the complexities revealed in the courtroom would become a foundation for a stronger, more authentic connection. He reflected often on the idea that people are more than what they appear to be, and that true understanding requires patience, observation, and a willingness to embrace complexity. His wife had shown him this truth in the most profound way, revealing that strength, intelligence, and love could coexist with secrecy and discretion. He felt privileged to share a life with someone so extraordinary, someone whose past had been carefully hidden, not out of malice, but out of wisdom and foresight. In the end, the man realized that the courtroom revelation had not destroyed their life, it had strengthened it. The silence that had fallen that day had been replaced with clarity, understanding, and a renewed sense of connection. The story of his wife's identity was no longer a mystery, but a testament to her courage, intelligence, and grace. Together, they faced the future with renewed trust, admiration, and love, carrying the lessons of the past into the promise of tomorrow.